Welcome to the Kind Leader Podcast, where empathy meets action in the world of leadership. Your host, Gino Degregori, engages with innovators and seasoned professionals from diverse sectors, all demonstrating the power of leading with kindness. And now, your host, Gino Degregori.
Today's guest believes that excellence doesn't happen by accident. It happens on purpose. If you ever struggle to move from intention to action in your leadership, this episode is for you. I'm Gino Degregori, and welcome to the Kind Leader Podcast. Our guest, John Gallagher, is the founder and CEO of Growing Champions Coaching and Consulting. With over 25 years of experience in leadership and lean transformation, John has coached leaders at companies like IBM, Mitsubishi, Electric, Harvard University. He is a productivity expert, a faith-driven leader, and the host of Uncommon Leader podcast. His journey from corporate leader to wellness advocate and executive coach has inspired thousands. But most importantly, he's a fellow WVU Mountaineer.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
Mountaineers.
Why does this conversation matter? John brings a unique blend of performance coaching, faith, and intentional living that aligns deeply with the core of kind leadership, leading with discipline, clarity, and compassion. Welcome, John. It's great to have you with us today. To start, could you share a little bit about you and your journey, please?
Absolutely, Gino. Thank you so much for the opportunity to chat today and add value to the listeners of your podcast. You're doing some great things. And I love the title as we go forward in terms of Kind Leader. I look forward to sharing some of those stories. As you mentioned, you did such a nice job. I need to take you around with me to help me write my bio. And I think we could have ended the podcast right there. Hopefully, I don't let everybody down in terms of that great introduction. But yeah, I mean, for the last 5 years, I was the founder and CEO of Growing Champions. It's a coaching and consulting firm. Ultimately, at its high level from a mission standpoint is to inspire and encourage leaders to reach their potential. I do believe that leaders really facing today have not reached that potential. They are really settling for whether it's complacency or just kind of doing okay. And I know that's just not what we are called to be as leaders, that we are called to be so much more and have an impact, especially from a legacy standpoint. So while I spent the last 25 years, if you will, both in manufacturing roles and in consulting roles, helping organizations and individuals grow their business and become more productive in their business, what I was learning along the way is that it took a whole leader approach to make that happen. And if the leader ultimately wasn't invested in themselves to continuously grow, it was going to be very difficult to sustain any growth that was there. So, it's my mission to help those organizations see the potential, to put the structures and processes in place to achieve that potential, and then ultimately see the kingdom impact that they were designed to be, making a difference in the world.
Beautiful, beautiful story, and congratulations on all your success for sure. Well, one of the questions that I love asking our guests is, what does it mean to you to be a kind leader?
Gino, I love the question. Listening through a couple episodes, I love some of the stories that ultimately come out of that. And I like to define it at the start by really talking about a story for me. And it was one of the things that ultimately led me into the coaching space that I've been working with the last 5 years as an individual. But I was sitting in a performance review, and I'll never forget, again, the feeling, almost the smell of the room, large conference table. It was in a large conference room that had glass all the way around the room, people walking by who knew I was getting my performance review. At the time, I was the acting president of a large division of a manufacturing company. We were in search of a replacement president, and I had been asked to take on some of those responsibilities. And my boss at the time came in to do my performance review, and he started off right off the bat. He says, "I'm not rating you as the acting president. I'm actually doing your performance review as if you were the president of the division." So that started it off right off the bat. But to get really quick into the story, as he went through that, at the end you get your rating on a scale of 1 to 5, how your performance being 1 being not good at all, 5 being top of the heap in terms of performance and doing great. And my overall score was a 2.3 in this rating.
Wow.
And I just sat there, and I probably had that kind of face, Gino, as I talked through it. And I just sat there in silence. And this was 20 some years ago. So young leader looking to grow, but I'm still in my mid 30s. And all of a sudden these 2 big alligator tears start rolling down my cheeks. I couldn't say a word. And he asked me, he says, "What do you think?" I said, "I need help." And what I had really meant from that in terms of needing help I had not heard of before, but I learned recently during that time of executive coaching to help me grow as a leader, that I needed to get some more time with an executive coach to help me to grow. And I knew in that performance review, my normal response would have been very negative. So those tears were not a negative as much as they were that plea for help, because what that leader did for me was he gave me feedback that was both true. There was nothing in what he said that wasn't true in terms of the performance and how we needed to grow as an organization, but also he delivered it with grace. I knew that he cared for me when he was delivering that. And so at that point in time, whether I knew it then in terms of talking about a kind leader, I really realized what the definition of a kind leader was, is one who can deliver truth, okay, with grace. Because we can ultimately talk about what a not kind leader is someone who delivers information with grace, but no truth. That's just being nice. That's saying something that we want others to hear. But delivering truth with grace is the ultimate, I believe, sign of a kind leader.
Well said, John. I mean, it's beautiful. I love that, truth and grace. I mean, that's what we need a lot when we're having, some of those difficult conversations. We here in the organization, we did our performance review a while back as well, like a couple months ago, early in the year. And I agree. I mean, if we are not providing that truth so people can truly become better, leverage the tools, get you the right resources, put the right, leaders over you to help you and guide you, as well as external areas where, you can help. But you can't just deliver it in a way that is going to potentially hurt. So what is the difference, right? How do you deliver a message gracefully? And that is a balancing act, I think, right? It's not an easy task, but I think a lot of times it gets kind of tricky to really deliver that. So, I mean, do you have any thoughts on, any recommendations, especially, when delivering a message like that? You took it, but I'm sure you've also provided that to your employees in the past.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I mean, that because you talked about it as well. Like, I see it as a 2x2 matrix. Like, there's amount of grace, there's low grace, high grace. That's the y-axis. There's low truth, high truth, okay, or more truth. I don't know if you can be more low truth or more truth, but ultimately low and high. And if you're in that truth without grace, you kind of touched on that. You're ultimately, as a leader, just coming across as a bully, and your influence or impact is going to be limited. I look back on that time, and I know that as I've looked at my coaching, I'm most powerfully positioned to help the person that I used to be sitting inside that seat. And when I think back in terms of who my avatar, who my perfect clients are that I work with, it was both me sitting in that seat receiving that feedback, but to your point, it's also that leader sitting across from the table who was delivering truth with grace. So intentionality is very important in terms of going through that. And I tell you, much like you prepare for a presentation, when you prepare for feedback, you've got to have a structure or a framework to be able to deliver that, almost a script where you can do role playing. I harken back to a story back in the 1990s when I was early on in my leadership journey. I had an individual who was on my team, and I was frankly ready to let him go. I was in this truth with no grace category, if you will, because I kept getting feedback. I'd observed they were upsetting people. But I went to a leadership retreat and learned this framework called situation, behavior, impact, action that I learned. And I'll talk about that. And I went back and gave feedback to this individual based on, here's the situation, here's the behavior that I observed, and here's the impact it had on me and on the team inside the room. And then here's the action that I want you to take going forward to be successful. That was the first time I had used that tool. When he sat across from me, he said, "That's the best feedback I've ever received. Why didn't you tell me that before?" I said, "Well, ultimately, I didn't really know. I didn't have a framework. I didn't have teaching to take me through that." Here I was, again, this is 1998. I was ready to let this individual go based on their performance, and I didn't know how to give them feedback. Here they are today, still with the same large company, 30 plus years later, as an executive in that $4 billion company. And I look back on that, not that I saved him or he saved me or whatever it is, but not being able to deliver feedback with truth and grace, how much has it capped individuals' leadership in their journey?
Beautiful, beautiful. Do you mind repeating it again? So you got situation?
Yeah, situation, behavior, impact, action, SBIA. And folks, that I coach, they get to hear that from me a bunch now, and they know, hey, you're going to tell me SBIA, right, John? But it ultimately is as simple as that, because you can use that for positive feedback as well. But it's using that structure to write the script, especially before a tough conversation. Too many times we get into tough conversations, we think we know in our heads what we want to say, but we ultimately get in there and we get distracted. We get deflected from the main point,
Right.
and it takes us down other rabbit holes. And we get done, we're like, did I really communicate the point that I wanted to communicate? Just by doing that script and taking us through and practicing that role playing provides the framework to stay focused on that topic.
Well, I like that. Actually, I don't know. This is just as you were explaining that, and you mentioned role play. I kind of want to role play here and kind of provide some examples to our audience here, because one of the things, as you look at the SBIA, I like that because it's definitely the situation you're in, right? It gives you that take a step back of the environment. What is really happening?
Yeah, that's right. The third perspective, like from the corner of the room, right?
Right.
We were in this meeting yesterday with 12 people, including, folks from the shop floor and from the office and from leadership. That's the situation. Yep.
Yeah. And then the behavior based on how the employee is from whose eyes are we looking at the behavior?
Sure. Great question. So as the leader giving the feedback, that behavior, you want to bring that from what you observed as the leader. Mm-hmm. You don't want to say, here's what others told me. You want to be very specific about the behavior that you observed. And again, you can use this feedback for friends, family members, however it is. In this case, we're talking about a leader, though, to an employee. So it's the behavior that you observe. For example, I observed that during the meeting, you checked your email 3 times on your phone. Okay, that was the very specific behavior that was observed. Don't have to go any further. And it's not one of those things that you can really debate it. This is what I observed from a behavior standpoint. So it's some kind of action that you had seen, or the behavior might have been you interrupted this individual 2 times during the meeting. Right. That's just behavior. Absolutely.
Gotcha. I like that. And then, by the way, I am going to use this for my kids.
Good. Because it works. It really does. Yep.
I got a 12-year-old who's he's the baby of the family, and he's becoming a teenager. So definitely, as I'm thinking through this. This is really important. And then the impact, their behavior could impact the team members, the environment, the customers, right? Like you also highlight that to them specifically.
Absolutely. So here's the impact that I observed, right? So in the case of this meeting, and it might have been that they interrupted people 3 times. The impact it had was that people stopped giving feedback, during the meeting. Or the impact that it had on me was that you didn't care about that individual enough to allow them to finish that sentence. And frankly, the impact it had on you, the individual you're giving the feedback to, is that person likely has a lack of trust level with you that they have in dealing with situations. So the impact you're bringing from many perspectives, because it could be that it deflated a very energetic meeting. It took the energy out of the room. That was the impact that it had. But what you really want to do, especially in looking, if you're giving constructive feedback, is the impact that it had on that individual, from the perspective of many, so that they realize what potential damage they were creating. Yeah.
Because I would think that we all have our own perspective in how we navigate, how we see, right? And then the minute, we're in our own little world, and how I see things and how you see things is going to be different, right? I always tell people, you and I could be standing in front of each other and we look at the number 6 to me, but you're looking at a number 9, right? We're looking at the same thing essentially, but they're from different perspectives and different views. Until I realized that, hey, I need to go and step on your side to really see that number 9.
Sure.
That's what really, again, taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture really makes an impact in any conversation or situation you're in. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I do agree. And I think you're exactly right. Can you walk a while in my shoes, if you will, to make sure you can understand that perspective? Look, the impact statement is probably the most subjective in terms of that conversation. But it really is, as leaders, back to that kindness, it's our job to deliver that truth with grace so that they see what type of impact that they're having.
Beautiful. And then the last one, obviously, is action. So you provide ideas or recommendations, or do you allow them to come up with ideas and recommendations, and then you solidify that?
The answer is yes. Absolutely. Okay. And the reason I say that is that too many times a consultant, like I am, answers with "it depends."
Right.
But it does depend on the situation. If it's something that needs immediate attention, I will address it specifically and say, this needs to change immediately. Okay. Or this behavior cannot be observed again, or there could be future consequences, up to and including, the traditional termination type conversation. But after you have the conversation, you're looking to get feedback from them and say, I'd love to ask, so what's one thing you can do, okay, to help eliminate that behavior in the future?
Yeah.
Many times they might say, I don't know. And without getting tricky with them, saying, well, if you did know, what would you say?
Yeah.
That's one question you can have, especially when you have a relationship with them. But you might say, look, here's what I really need.
Right.
In future meetings, I want you to leave your laptop closed during that meeting. Okay. Then when you have the opportunity to observe that again, and that individual did that, it's very important for the leader to follow up afterward and say, I just want to let you know, I observed that. I appreciate you taking on the recommendation I had from a behavior standpoint. I saw that you kept your laptop closed, and I want to let you know I appreciated that. So that follow-up is very important as well after you ask for that action to change, positively or constructively, negatively, in terms of how they need to change.
Yeah. And then how often, I guess, it all depends also on organizations. Some people do it once a year, once a quarter, or some people have like people that are touching base every week. Obviously, that's all part of how you want to grow your career within that year and kind of navigate through that, right? So making sure that that's being followed, some of those actions are being followed.
Again, it's the level of intensity, right? But I think we're always looking for things for folks to be done correctly. I think of SBIA. That is not a performance review. That's a feedback tool. And so the closer to when the situation and behavior has occurred that you're giving that feedback, again, whether it's because I could do it, hey, yesterday in the meeting, I want to recognize that you were very cordial with two of the employees who are going through something very tough. That was the behavior. I think that impacted them and got them to speak out more. That's really good. I want you to keep doing that in meetings in the future. You can use that as a constructor or as a positive feedback tool as well. But it's important, the timeliness of it. If you have a behavior that you did not like as a leader and you wait a month to give them feedback, they're going to be like, well, what did you wait so long for to give me that feedback? And so that timeliness is very important. Now, you might have been asking about the follow-up. I think the follow-up is, certainly within a week in terms of when you give that feedback, that you follow up with them, you check in with them and see how they're doing. Frankly, to see how they're doing just from receiving the feedback, because we don't always receive feedback well as well. So.
Fair enough. And I like what you said is both positive and constructive in a way that you're trying to help them get better, or if they're doing something positive, enforce that positive thing that they've done so they can continue doing it and others can thrive as well. So I like that. I think I want to start using that in how I talked here within my people in the organization as well as home, because it's also consistency. If you start doing it more and you're able to do that, people can really get that feedback, positive or negative. It's going to be good. And if you don't have that framework, it's going to be tough too.
I think the framework's so good. And I had a CEO one time that I was coaching, probably with this tool or something else, and he referred to it as, it becomes a reflex. Just like we bend our arm to drink our cup of coffee, using SBIA just becomes a reflex. We observe something. We don't have to write it down. We just get that framework, and it just starts to flow within us, and it becomes a habit and something that we do regularly. Yeah.
And it's funny. I read a lot of books or listen to books, combination, as well as I've had personal development too. And one of the things that you highlight, especially as one of the things that you mentioned, your first review at 2.3, right? It's like, okay, I need help, right? What is your perspective and your thoughts on the power of personal development and reading as a leadership tool?
On reading specifically? Well, so first of all, I think there's a couple of frameworks. I believe that if an organization, John Maxwell is one of my favorite authors. And so, reading is very powerful. It's 1998. I was given my first leadership book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. In that book specifically, he talks about the law of the lid. And the lid that he talks about there is our own personal development as the leader. That if we're not continuously growing as leaders, then we will become the lid on the potential of the rest of our team and our organization. That the organization cannot rise any further than our level of leadership. If they surpass us, the individual surpass us, one of two things is going to happen. Okay, they're going to fall back because they're not being recognized for that growth that they're experiencing, or they're going to leave your organization because you're holding them back. Both of those things are really bad. So as leaders, we need to have that continuous growth mindset. And one of the ways that we continuously grow is to learn from the stories of others. And what better way than to read? So reading has become a twice daily discipline of mine. And, again, another framework. If you think about most leadership books are somewhere in the 220 to 250 pages. And when you think about 220 to 250 page book, it can feel overwhelming. But I got an idea for you. Let's just do 5 pages in the morning, 5 pages in the evening before we go to sleep. You do 10 pages a day, you're going to read 12 to 14 books a year.
Wow.
That in and of itself, the knowledge that you gain from that is going to be very, very powerful. Amongst the other tools that we have, whether we go to retreats and things like that to take days, or listen to great podcasts like The Kind Leader, as another way to share and to learn. Reading is such a powerful tool. And again, regardless of what you might be trying to grow your business leadership, but what other areas of your life are you trying to go as well? You might be learning about fitness. For me, daily reading in the Bible is something that helps me to grow my faith as well. If I'm not reading the scriptures on a daily basis, how am I going to grow my faith? It doesn't happen by osmosis or serendipity. So it's a discipline we've got to create.
Beautiful tips. And I agree, even 5 in the morning, 5 pages in the evening, 12 to 14 books a year. That's amazing. So I do listen to a lot of, like I said, podcasts and books and then read. And I agree. I mean, that analogy of you're the lid to the organization. If you're not growing, you're staying stagnant or, essentially dying, right? That's right. From a growth perspective. So from a personal development and you being an executive coach, what is your recommendation on that? And then who should go after that, or who should be leading and leveraging? Are you talking about only executives or mid-level managers, or is there coaching available to all different levels?
Yeah, so I think it is available to all different levels if we have the right perspective to look at it. So when I think about an individual leader, let's take the title out of it for a minute, of manager or director or executive, and just say that, a leader is someone who influences others. And that's how I really like to take a look at it. You may be the leader of your family. You might be the leader of the parking team at church, which I am. You might be the leader of an organization. Regardless of that, you've got some influence in your life that you need to continuously grow. And there's a decision that you've got to make right at the start. That's the first step, is making a decision that I'm going to grow. And I talk about a 3-step framework and how I identify the vision I have for growth. It's so what, now what, so that. So what is the opportunity that I have in front of me? I want to be a better father. I want to be a better coach. I want to be a better executive. Okay. Well, now what then? I must change. I must grow. I must have a difference inside of my life. But the power comes in the so that statement. It's the why. So that I can reach my potential. So that I leave a legacy in my work. If it has to do with my fitness and getting healthy, so that in the future I can sit down on the floor and have tea with my granddaughter, or go out on the basketball court and shoot hoops with my grandson and still be able to. That's that purpose that you really get, because without that purpose to link to, I think it's very easy for us to ultimately think that this motivation is too hard. I can be motivated for a little bit of time, but if I'm not inspired by that vision, then I'm not going to have that personal growth mindset. So your question ultimately was, is coaching available to everyone? Back to your book question. There's coaching and wisdom and mentors in every one of those books that are out there.
Right.
But if you're following someone on a podcast, okay, and listening to their story and finding one or two, you don't need 20 different voices inside of your head to help you be a coach. But what is the area that you want to grow in, and go out and find someone to help you get there. If you have the chance, if you have the resources to invest in a coach, whether it be an executive coach, a life coach, a trainer for your health, whatever that is, I would absolutely encourage you to make that investment. It's the biggest return that you can have when you invest in yourself. And I've always had a coach. I have a branding coach right now that working to help me develop my executive coaching brand. I have a trainer that I work with who's helping to train me now for my second Spartan, not because I want to run a Spartan race, but because I want to increase the health span of my life to go past where I am today. And I have a mentor that I meet with on a regular basis when it comes to business. He just doesn't charge me, but he's a mentor that's been part of my life for 25 years that continues to pour into me.
Beautiful.
Now, when we do that as leaders, what we also learn is that we can be that mentor, that coach to someone else in our life as well.
Yeah.
We're learning those skills to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well said, John. I mean, I like that example also on the I need to do this so that, right? It's the value and the impact. I don't know if I share, but I'm a software engineer by trade, and it reminded me of agile methodology, which is, as you gather in requirement, it's like, as a manager, I want to do this so that I can X, Y, and Z, right?
Exactly right. It's a logic flow, right? And again, part of that, none of these things that I have as frameworks are things that I, quote, invented on my own, if you will. They've been through reading these books and learning from others. The specific framework that I talk about is right out of the Bible, and John 3:16 being one of the most powerful voices. I mean, the so what was, God so loved the world that now what was he sent his only son. He took action. He sent his only son, right? And the reason the so that was so that we could be saved. I mean, that framework exists all through the Bible. It exists all through books. And you see those two words, so that. When you see those two words, either in the Bible or when you're reading, so that, pay attention to what's after, because there's purpose in what's coming after that as to why you do it.
I like that. No, that's great. I mean, I appreciate the, I didn't know that about, the scripture and kind of highlighting some of that. But speaking of which, how do you integrate your faith? How do you help that integrate so it doesn't feel like it's either forced or just your experience? I would love your experience and how you are working right now and how that's being integrated in the organizations.
Yeah. So specifically for me as an entrepreneur, I'll say that it feels a little bit easier, if you will, right? So that I can share my faith openly and not worry about some of that persecution that you face with regards to favoritism, whatever it is. But in terms of integrating my faith, what it is that it's those disciplines that I have, that if I say I'm going to be a Christian, right, yet I'm not living out those disciplines, that's not a great model for anyone who's a leader. It says, well, he says he's a Christian, yet he exhibits these behaviors over here, not very aligned with what he talks about. It was the year 2017 when I was 80 pounds overweight, yet I was coaching individuals that they needed to exercise and eat better on a regular basis. And I had health scare, and I'm thinking to myself, who am I to try and coach others on their own health journey if I'm not able to do this myself? And it really was an awakening for me to go down that path. So it is, for me, an opportunity to live a life that is modeling the values that I've set. We have a family set of values that we work, and I live those things out. And many times it creates curiosity in the space of individuals that they're looking to learn more. But I don't have the desire or the need to say, we need to read scripture before we have our coaching sessions. And that's what it's about. No, it's really about how I behave and how I model those behaviors that afford me the opportunity to then share my faith as well with those individuals. So I don't only work with Christians. I don't only work with Christian organizations. I work with organizations that want to make a difference. And ultimately, the way I share my vision in making a difference is that one day I'll hear those words, well done, good and faithful servant, come on in. We're ready to have you here. So if I can live those things out, I'm going to be able to influence others inside of that space.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well said. And I appreciate the perspective too on how do you navigate and work with your customers, and not just Christians, but you also you bring those values and beliefs to help navigate. And in some ways, John, I think I'm trying to do the same thing from a kind leadership, right? Show the world out there, the business world, that we can build organizations through kindness, through accountability, through empathy, and showing the world that there's so much opportunity, there's so much abundance out there. There's ways that we can collaborate better. We can work better together to go farther, to go faster, right? And, just this morning I was talking to a customer, and we were talking about the type of people that we bring, as part of our team. And they were comparing us with others in a good way. They were like, the people that you bring to the table not only has the skill sets, they have the requirements that we need, but they have the personality and the drive to help, which sets us apart. And then you talk about branding, right? And that's the brand that I'm building to show that you work with our company, you're going to get kind leaders to help you with your mission, to help you with your business, to expand on that. And it warmed my heart to hear that feedback this morning. It's like, oh, that's great. So it's working.
Yes.
You know, and it's a good intention, right? We're putting the good intention. We're not leading with, what's the most money we can make. We're leading with what's the most impact we can generate with the right people that we're bringing to the table.
Absolutely.
So I thank you for explaining to me your perspective and a lot of great things there. One thing that I'm doing now is flip the mic. I think I share with you, right? So is there a question that you have for me on anything that you want to know?
Gino, I think it's a great question. I love that. Flip the script. You know that I'm the host of the Uncommon Leader podcast as well. And I hadn't used something like that before, although I have sat on the other side of the table for my own podcast to get a bunch of questions to me. So I host the Uncommon Leader podcast. And there's, when you hear that term uncommon leader, what does that bring into your mind in terms of vision? What is an uncommon leader?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And uncommon leader for me, I think it's someone who is curious a lot, who is bringing some value from a different perspective and not your normal old school, and I say that respectfully, right? Kind of just pushing forward and not caring about a thing, right? And it's different, right? We're seeing a big shift where now things are more about connection, right? Connecting with people and bringing those values. So I see that from my perspective. That's how I define it.
Okay, I appreciate it. And again, as I think about it and what you're doing with the kind leader, Gino, I think it's really powerful because I do believe in the sphere that we play, it is uncommon for individuals to exhibit kind leadership and believe that that leadership can lead to uncommon impact, uncommon results, leaving a legacy. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, thank you. And then one word that I love using is generational impact.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Essentially, that's what we're trying to do here, right?
Yes.
Our community, our own path and our podcast and what we're trying to generate the message is we don't want to just impact the people that are listening here, but for generations to come, and how we can continue to change that and become almost from an uncommon to a common, right? Like this is now the norm, right? This is what we are going to be doing. So I appreciate what you're doing as well. So,
you talk about that. What it brings to mind for me as well is this genealogy, if you will. And so in the space of our personal lives, we have our family tree. But in the space of our leadership journey, we also probably have a leadership genealogy as well. Who was that leader that instilled in you the desire to grow and the desire to get better on a daily basis? And then how are you taking that, and whose leadership genealogy are you going to impact, to your point, for generations to come so that it lives on? I often refer to that as the greatest story ever told. Outside of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, which is the greatest story ever told, in my opinion, from a faith standpoint, is that when somebody writes your name on their list as someone who's made a positive impact in their life, you may never even know that. Okay, but that's the greatest story ever told when somebody writes that down. So
beautiful. So we're going to go into you've got 3 rapid questions for you. What's one book every leader should read?
Yeah, I touched on this earlier. The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership is the book that should be required reading, I believe, for all leaders who are coming into that. That was the first leadership book that I read in 1998. I've since read it at least 2 more times because they had the 10th anniversary edition and the 25th anniversary edition that came out in 2023 that I read through also. But it really is a pragmatic approach to humble leadership that can be successful in today's crazy world. That is.
Beautiful, beautiful. Favorite quote or mantra?
Wow. If I can use my own, if you will, in terms of this, I think of a couple things is that people will change when the displeasure of remaining the same is greater than the discomfort of the change itself.
Nice. Thank you. If you could have coffee with anyone in the past or the present, who would it be and why?
Yeah, I remember this question. I love this as the coffee question. And as I thought about it, I'm probably going to give you a little bit of an uncommon answer. But again, I'm doing this so that I can actually sit down with my grandsons, who I have no grandchildren yet, in the future, and have coffee with them
Nice.
and really talk to them about what that means. Like the things that I'm doing from a health standpoint are very important. Look, if you forced me into asking in terms of somebody from the past who I'd want to sit down and have coffee with, I would believe it would be with the best leader, and that's with Jesus. Just to understand how he chose, those 12 disciples that he did, who were just common men, and ultimately mentored them into uncommon, and the impact that he's had on the world. It's just unbelievable.
Beautiful. Well said. Awesome, John. Thank you very much for that. Another thing that I'd like to do now is I have a kind leadership challenge that I'm putting out there for our audience to do. So based on and I'm going to use the SBIA framework. If you could tag me and John with the Kind Leader Challenge on LinkedIn and share what you've learned as it relates to have you implemented or talked about SBIA. Just share some feedback and thoughts. Would love to hear what you guys kind of come up with. So.
Yeah, and let me offer this to your listeners as well. I mean, I've got a template that I can send them as well. If they tag us in that post, I'd be happy to send them the template that I use to help develop that script with a little bit of teaching as to what goes in each box. Be happy to share that.
Excellent. So we'll put that in our show notes, and then people will get those that challenge in place. Awesome, John. So where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, once again, Gino, thank you so much for the opportunity, and obviously the opportunity to even share about myself. I mentioned I'm the host of the Uncommon Leader podcast that they can find on all the platforms. But specifically, if they wanted to get in touch with me, it's just coachjohngallagher.com. You can subscribe to my blog there that's in there. You can find my social media components that are there. But that's the main hub that I send folks to. And certainly if they're interested in coaching in the future, there's a button on there. They can set up a free 30-minute coaching call where we can talk about some of the distractions that are keeping them from achieving their potential.
Beautiful, beautiful. Any final message you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, Gino, I think if I had one that I would share, it would really be, we touched on it early on in the journey, that excellence only happens on purpose. And look, good intention, no doubt, is very important. But good intention with bad discipline leads to excuses. Good intention with good discipline leads to excellence. And that excellence only happens on purpose. So schedule your disciplines, schedule your priorities, measure what you want to be successful, and utilize those tools to get you there.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you very much for that. So John, thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom. And to our audience, thank you for listening to the Kind Leader Podcast. And remember, be kind, bring value, rise together.